Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Yossi Schmidt Show. Welcome to the fifth year of Team Reporter, the fifth season of Team Reporter. Wow. Guys, I will provide an explanation of what TWS does at the end, and also a reason why we didn't change our name. However, I first need to talk about the New York Times. Yes, that is right. The New York Times decided that they're going to be very biased when it comes to reporting about the Israel-Palestine conflict. What do I mean? I'll tell you what I mean. Last week, the New York Times had the goal to report the day after the terrorist attack, two killed after car rammed into bus stop. They left out who the victims were. They left out who the driver of the car was. Listen, I understand that they might not want to take the side of Israel. I understand that they might want to not take sides. But by the fact that they're not taking sides, or by the fact that they're leaving out information, is very, very dangerous. You're normalizing terrorists. When I hear of a terror attack in America and the media doesn't talk about who the driver of the car is because it's an African American, the right on America goes ballistic. The right on in America accuses the mainstream media of race hustling, leaving out stories, and stories will die because the attacker is African American. And I'm not saying that the right is wrong, but when it comes to Israel, and the New York Times decides, you know what, we're not going to mention that the attacker was a Palestinian, and we're not going to mention that by the bus stop, the victims were two Israeli innocent children, 6 and 8. But it gets even worse. A couple weeks ago, there was a different terrorist attack as Jews were coming out of synagogue, right as the onset of Shabbos. And what did the New York Times do? 5 murdered after coming out of house of worship among deadly weekend in Jenin, where the IDF killed well-known terrorists. So is the New York Times trying to normalize terrorism in the fact that they're trying to remain unbiased? Or are they quite literally taking Palestine's side when they're clueless? I'm not saying that Israel's right or that Palestine's right. What I'm saying is, as reporters and as people of law of news, we have a duty to report the facts and nothing but the facts. We have a duty to tell people the actual stories. It's disgusting when the New York Times does this. It comes across like they're normalizing terrorism. We cannot tolerate this. The New York Times must be called out with the same vigor that they're called out by the conservatives when it comes to African Americans, or when it comes to Republicans versus Democrats. But no, we have to go ahead and keep quiet. No one's talking about it. The New York Times must stop. The New York Times sold themselves. Listen, as a Jew, it really hits home that they're normalizing terrorist attacks. Can you imagine how the parents and the family of the two innocent children who were murdered by a terrorist felt or would feel if they know what the New York Times did? They lost their children. Their children have nothing to do with the Israel-Palestine conflict. Their children were just coming to the bus stop and just doing their thing when a horrible human being drove into the bus stop. This is disgusting and has to be called out on every level. I call on the president and every single congressman and every single senator to come out against the New York Times. Normalization of terrorism, no matter who it comes from, must not be done. The New York Times is a disgrace to journalism. I did a podcast a couple months ago about how the left is trying to bury journalism. The left isn't trying to bury journalism. They already buried it. They're able to pass whatever they want because the journalists don't ask questions. I'm here to remind you that journalists have a job to report nothing but the facts, not their opinion, not this and that, not be disinformation experts, but to do their job. They also have to ask the hard-hitting questions. Why did the terrorists do this? Why was Palestine celebrating the attack? Why? They have to ask the hard-hitting questions. What's going on in Ohio? I know this has nothing to do with the anti-Semitism of the New York Times, but the New York Times is terrible. They have gone off the deep end. I refuse to call the New York Times a newspaper. It's time to boycott the New York Times. And anyone who is human has to see through what they're doing. 5 years ago, I started Team with Reporter, February 6th, 2018. As a way to combat fake news. I know a lot of people didn't know that, but that is true. 5 years ago, when I started Team with Reporter, and then eventually went to fight for the Constitution and against censorship of conservatives. It's all so we could be able to speak and defend ourselves. Team with Reporter, the name came across not because I'm a globalist, but rather because I feel that the whole world needs to be free. The whole world needs to have guns. The whole world needs to have freedom of speech. It starts here in America, but it's time to fight for the world to be able to do whatever they can. Live life. Freedom from government. The name Team World Supporter is going to stay because that is what I do. I fight for the world to be free. Me and my team will always be there to fight for America and then for the world. Yes, America is our country and America has to be taken care of. However, I will always put America first and then the rest of the world. The New York Times might put America last, but they're definitely putting Judaism last too. They go ahead and lie about the Jewish school system, education system, and they go ahead and claim whatever they want. No more. It's time to say goodbye to the New York Times. It's time to hold the New York Times accountable. America, remember, there's not a lot of people that are actually fighting for you. There's a lot of conservatives that claim to be fighting for you, but they're really in it for the fame. There's a lot of politicians claiming to fight for you, but they're really in it for the fame. They're really in it for the back pocket. You know, a friend of mine decided to give me a gift the other day. Recently, we were hit with COVID. And COVID is a proof that our politicians are in it for themselves and they're in it for the power. My friend gave me this book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Steve Deace and Daniel Horowitz. I plan on reading it and giving everyone a review of it. Steve Deace and Daniel Horowitz are well known for how unbiased they are. It's time to get your news from unbiased places. I will be seeing you next week, hopefully. Remember, hold everyone accountable.